I keep seeing people saying that this movie isn't about anything, that there are no deeper themes or meanings, and it's the first Alien movie to be about nothing except other Alien movies and referencing other Alien movies. I disagree incredibly strongly in the case of this movie, but I also just hate that criticism in general. I feel like it's generally lazy, and while there are exceptions, there are movies that are so derivative and pandering and studio, driven that they verge past derivative and into like artless. But I think those examples are fewer and farther between. And I think the criticism of like, oh, this movie's not about anything, it's completely shallow and empty, is verging into anti-intellectualism and mainly used as a way to shame other people. It's like this snarky version of film criticism where you're essentially pointing a finger and calling people who disagree with you stupid and saying you're too dumb to understand like the good art. I think I don't think that's great. I'm not a fan of that kind of film criticism. And in the case of Alien Romulus, whether you loved all of the creative decisions that were made or not, Fede Alvarez and Ridley Scott have come out and said that this was their idea, that they were excited about, that they wanted to take the franchise that Ridley Scott has been, producing from the very beginning. It's not a soulless, artless decision. You cannot like it, but it was what they wanted to do. Furthermore, Fede Alvarez has explicitly clarified that it very obviously is an immigrant story about the effects of late-stage capitalism and colonialism and imperialism and these young people that are literally already dead. Their best chance of survival is going up against a xenomorph because they're already dead. That's how oppressive and brutal their life is, just existing under the boot of Weyland-Yutani, which I think is incredibly relevant. And even though you could argue that that is a heavy-handed metaphor, people keep pointing out the canary, the split second of Kaylee Spenny's character Rain looking at the canary. I don't necessarily think that subtlety in art is the greatest thing ever. I think that sometimes it's okay to have very clear messaging. But that's also far from the only theme. I think all of the themes and messaging in this movie are interwoven so beautifully and work so effectively to tell a story that is compelling. And sure, you can say that you don't like the crew as much as you like any of the crews from the other movies. This isn't my favorite crew, but I do like the characters and understand their motivation, and I understand what's happening with them. The Alien franchise has always been about working class people, essentially, other than maybe the prequels. Genuinely, they are stories that are about working class people going up against greedy, evil corporations. And I think the character of Andy in this movie is an incredibly interesting and effective way to use the androids in 2024, because the Alien franchise has always used the android characters in really interesting ways and different kinds of characters. But I think the suggestion, raising the question of, is AI the threat that we think it is right now, or are humans the threat? Where does humanity end and AI begin? And is there going to be a point where we think right now that AI is going to replace us? And it might, but not because AI is the threat. Because AI, if we truly reach a place where we are going to have genuine artificial intelligent beings that are created by humans, aren't they also just going to become subjugated laborers just like the rest of us? Are they going to replace us only insofar as becoming the oppressed laborers that we are right now? And our oppression is going to verge into joblessness and financial disparity because we aren't going to be able to compete. But then that also means that if these beings are truly AI, they're going to be subjugated just like us. And I think it was interesting how Ripley as a character had, her empathy was illustrated through Jonesy the cat and Newt. And I think it's fascinating in 2024 to have our new final girl protagonist going up against the aliens, and her strongest connection to anyone or anything in the world is to an AI, an artificial being. I think it raises a lot of really interesting questions about the purpose of technology, and it taps into a lot of existing themes in the Alien franchise, like the spirituality of very scientific things like evolution and technology. I think it's very thematically resonant and cool, and I think that the relationship that is acted beautifully between Kaylee Spenny's Rain and David Johnson's Andy is, the beating heart of the movie. I think it's very well done. Sure. This is the most broadly appealing Alien movie since Aliens. Is broad appeal a bad thing all of a sudden? I don't understand. Literally, they listened because audiences hated every single Alien sequel and prequel since Aliens. So they took your feedback. I still think it's enjoyable. I'm not shaming anybody for having any opinion, but I think it's crazy to say, this movie isn't about anything. It very obviously is about a lot of things, and I think it's very interestingly done.